She pulled into the lot before sunrise, ready to set a tone. Instead, three uniforms closed in, suspicion hardening their faces, barking orders, circling like they'd treat a suspect. They had no clue the woman they were cornering would soon sign their evaluations. What came after would rattle the walls. It was 6:45 a.m. when Naomi Brooks slid out of her graphite gray sedan, shoulders squared, breath steady. The asphalt was quiet except for the crisp cadence of her heels. She'd chosen a tailored black blazer and slate slacks. No dress blues today. Those would come later. Nerves fluttered, but not because she doubted herself. After 22 years in Army military police, detective stints, and command posts across three cities, this was day one as chief of Riverbend Precinct. She'd earned all of it. The lot smelled faintly of oil and cold metal. Dawn painted the windshields a thin gold. Naomi angled toward the staff entrance, badge case tucked inside her jacket. Something in the air shifted, like a pressure drop before a storm. "Hey, halt right there!" snapped a voice at her back, clipped and authoritative. Naomi turned smoothly. Officer Mark Sutter was stride fast, palm hovering near his holster, jaw tight, eyes running calculations rooted in certainty that she didn't belong. Two more followed. Officer Laura Chu with a brows up. "Everything about you irritates me," look. And Officer Devin Miles lagging. Uneasy, gaze skittering. "Restricted access," Sutter said, stopping close enough to fog glass. "Move along." Naomi kept her breath from shortening. "I'm headed in." "I work here," she replied evenly. Sutter's glance traveled from her hair to her shoes and back, pausing on her brown skin, the plain clothes, the posture of someone who didn't flinch. His expression curated one message: "You're out of place." "Work?" he scoffed. Not a grin, something colder. "Lady, I don't know what you think this is, but this isn't your corner. This is a police station." "I'm aware," Naomi said, quiet but firm. Chu stepped in, voice sugared and jagged. "Sweetie, if you've got a complaint, front entrance is that way. This door's for staff." "I am staff," Naomi said. Their laughter overlapped like bad harmony. Sutter shook his head. "Sure, and I'm the governor." "You have ID?" Naomi lifted her hand slowly, sliding a leather case free. She opened the wallet to reveal her credentials and shield. "Here." Sutter barely skimmed it, his mind already made. "Fake. Better than most, I'll give you that Naomi's pulse didn't spike. It's legitimate." "Mm-hmm." He raised his voice so the asphalt could hear it. "We've seen this scam. Counterfeit badges, thrift store uniforms, folks trying to slip past security. That's a crime." Chu folded her arms, chin tilting. "A serious one." Miles shifted behind them, weight bouncing from heel to heel like he wanted words, but was afraid to spend them. Sutter cut him off with a stare that said, "Don't." "10 seconds," Sutter announced. "Walk off this property, or I arrest you for trespass and impersonation." Naomi studied their faces, commanding, mocking, and conflicted. "You sure you want to do this?" Naomi asked, tone calm enough to make Miles flinch. "Lady, whatever stunt you're running ends now." Sutter closed the remaining space, presence heavy. "You're on police property with fake credentials." "That's enough for me." Naomi didn't escalate. No snapbacks, no performative outrage. She held Sutter's gaze like a level line. "I'm going inside," she said, unhurried. "You'll understand soon enough." She stepped past them, smooth as a door on oiled hinges. "Don't walk away from me," Sutter barked. Authority sharpening. "That's a lawful order." Naomi pivoted just enough to show she'd heard. "I haven't broken any law," she answered even softer. "Failure to comply," Sutter snapped. "Obstruction. That's arrestable." Chu's smirk said she agreed. Naomi turned to face all three. Same calm, but something underneath it made Miles take a small step back, like he'd brushed a live wire. "Do you treat women like this?" she asked. "Or just the black ones?" The words landed like a gavel. Chu's laugh clipped off mid-note. Color surged into Sutter's cheeks. "Only the ones acting suspicious," Chu shot back, though her confidence had a dent. Sutter advanced again, voice tightening to wire. "You're stalling." hiding something. And when we prove you lied about being a cop, that's jail time. Across the lot, a dog walker stopped, phone up, tiny red light reflecting in his pupils. The trio didn't notice. Their focus tunneled to Naomi, like she was the whole case file. She didn't blink when Sutter raised his tone, didn't engage with Chu's barbs, didn't feed the tension pooling around Miles. Silence, intentional and disciplined, sat on her shoulders like a familiar pack. Sutter wanted a scene, arguing, resistance, anything to cuff. Naomi gave him professionalism. Fine, he said finally, impatience fraying. We'll let the desk sergeant verify this inside. For your sake, I hope nothing else looks off. He tipped his chin toward her purse like it was a riddle containing contraband. Chu added, impersonating an officer is a felony here. Just so you're crystal, Naomi didn't react. She let her eyes note Sutter's badge number, not as a threat, but as a breadcrumb that might matter later. Then she moved, door, handle, entry. The staff door shut with a soft hydraulic click that sounded louder for how quiet everything suddenly was. Sutter and Chu shared a look that said, textbook stop, handled. Miles didn't settle. His eyes stayed pinned to the door Naomi had disappeared through, like it might swing open and rearrange his life. That felt off, he murmured. Off how? Sutter snapped. We blocked an intruder with forged credentials. That's the job, but what if nothing? Sutter cut in, voice final. We won't see her again. Miles nodded on the outside. Inside, something uncoiled, a warning coil of heat in his gut, the feeling you get when the ground looks stable but isn't. He stared at the door until his reflection steadied. 8 o'clock sharp, a building-wide chime summoned every sworn and civilian to the main briefing room. That alone was strange. General roll calls were usually for patrol, not detectives, not records. Today, 25 people crammed into rows, radios on silent, coffee cups sweating rings into the tabletops. The air felt carbonated with rumor. Conversations cut mid-sentence when the door eased open. Naomi stepped in, not in the blazer from the lot, but in full uniform. The gold stars at her collar caught the overheads. Her shield gleamed. Sound slid out of the room like a tide. Sutter sat third row. The color emptied from his face. Chu's mouth parted like a hinge. Miles, back row, closed his eyes for one beat, then opened them. Naomi took the front without asking. Attention already belonged to her. Good morning, she said, voice carrying to the corners without strain. I'm Chief Naomi Brooks. As of today, I lead Riverbend Precinct. You could have dropped a penny and heard where it landed. No one moved, no one coughed. Some of you didn't expect me, she continued. Some of you wonder if I've earned this. Her gaze located Sutter like he'd flipped on a beacon. He stared at the floor, blotched with embarrassment and something meaner. I did not get this badge because of my gender, Naomi said. I did not get it because of my race. I got it because I earned it. 22 years, military police, detective work, command roles, impeccable recommendations. She let the facts linger a beat, not to gloat, but to anchor the room to something heavier than gossip. Still, she went on, some of you will question my authority, not because of my record, but because of how I look, because I don't match the picture in your head of a police chief. Sutter shifted, suddenly too warm under fluorescent lights. The discomfort spread, whispering down rows, officers measuring themselves against the moment. That's a problem, Naomi said. Not just for me. For us. If you can't respect your own chief, how can the public believe you'll respect them? She pressed a button. The projector blinked to life, throwing charts, crime trends, complaint volumes, trust metrics, numbers that didn't flatter. We have a reputation problem, Naomi said. People don't trust us. They don't call when they should. They don't cooperate when they do. Too many encounters end with citizens feeling mistreated. Another slide, headlines clustered like storm clouds, excessive force allegations, a profiling suit, a community coalition demanding reform. These aren't abstract, she said. These are about this department, about some of you. The room stiffened. whispers skittering like mice in the walls. Naomi kept her tone even, unpunitive. I'm not here to run a public whipping post. I'm here to fix what's broken, but I can't do it alone. She clicked forward. A photograph filled the screen, a smiling black officer beside a cruiser, uniform crisp, light in his eyes. This is my brother Darius, she said, 8 years on the job. Solid officer. No sustained complaints. Never ducked a call. Never put paperwork on the back burner. Never made the news for the wrong reasons. Her voice thinned, not with weakness, but with memory. He was also one of a handful of black officers in his department, and there were people who didn't let him forget it. The room quit moving. Even the whisperers stopped breathing. Darius tried hard to belong, Naomi continued, laughed at jokes that chipped at his own dignity, stayed quiet when noise was required, thought that if he outworked the bias, it would dissolve. She steadied herself. Then one day, he watched another officer cross a line. The suspect was cuffed, face to pavement, no resistance left in him, Naomi said, but the officer kept hitting. Over and over, the air grew dense, choices cut cleanly in moments like that. Darius had two roads, she said. One kept him comfortable, silence, complicity, the thin blue shrug. The other honored his oath. She looked straight through the third row until Sutter had to look back. He chose right. He reported it. He wrote it up. He testified. Sutter watched his own hands like they'd become evidence. Do you know what happened next? Naomi asked. He was iced out. Backup arrived late. Reports were torn apart line by line. Promotions drifted past. Eventually he was pushed out. A slide changed. White text. Character is who you are when no one is watching. My brother's career ended because he chose character over comfort, Naomi said, because he did what was right instead of what was easy. She let that land and moved closer to the rows. I'm asking you to make that choice every day, every call, every interaction. Several heads dipped. Miles is among them. Some of you know exactly what I mean, she went on. You've heard comments that don't belong in a locker room, much less a patrol car. You've watched someone treat a neighborhood differently because of its ZIP code. You've witnessed shortcuts that chipped at someone's rights. Miles gave the smallest nod, a private confession. And you stayed quiet, Naomi said gently, because silence felt safer, because rocking the boat threatened your standing. She stopped pacing, letting the room sit with its own reflections. But it is your problem, she said, because when one of us acts badly, the badge on all our chests gets heavier. When one of us violates rights, all of us lose legitimacy. Sutter finally looked up, his expression braided tight with anger and shame, pride fighting accountability. I'm not here to haul anyone over old coals, Naomi said, but I am here to make repeats impossible. She rolled out the plan, mandatory bias training with real-world scenarios, body-worn cameras for everyone, community town halls on the calendar, a true early warning system for troubling patterns, zero tolerance for discriminatory conduct or unreasonable force. The list wasn't a threat, it was a standard. Some of you won't like it, Naomi said. Some will resist. Some will work around it. Her voice cooled. Those folks won't last here. I'd rather command a smaller team of ethical officers than a larger roster padded with the wrong people. Her eyes returned to Sutter, not to humiliate, but to anchor the message to a face. But if you want to help rebuild trust, she said, if you understand that service covers every block, every family, every person, then I want you with me. Naomi touched the star at her throat. This badge is heavy, she said. It should be. It represents the trust the public lends us and the duty we owe them. She scanned the room, letting quiet do work. Don't make it heavier by abusing it. She ended there, no applause line, no theatrical close, and walked out. 25 people were left to inventory themselves, habits, moments, rationalizations, and decide which parts they were willing to retire. Naomi threaded through corridors that still smelled like old coffee, found the modest office with her name already slotted in the plastic frame, and sat. The window faced the parking lot. She opened her laptop, clicked through a security portal, and requested exterior footage from that morning. Every station had cameras. Most people forgot. Minutes later, the file loaded. The approach, the confrontation, the measured voice, the dismissal. She saved it to a secure drive, marked only with a date time stamp. Insurance, not a weapon. A knock broke the quiet. "Come in," she said without looking up. The door swung, and Officer Devin Miles stepped inside like a man walking into weather. He hovered until she motioned him into the chair across from her desk. He sat but couldn't find her eyes. His hands worried at a fading scar on his knuckle. "Chief Brooks," he started, voice low. "I wanted to apologize for this morning in the lot." He swallowed. "I should have said something. I should have stepped in." Naomi leaned back, not forgiving, not condemning. "Why didn't you?" He chewed on the air a moment. I I know why, but it isn't good," he said finally. "I was scared. Sutter and Chu, they're they've got pull. They've been here a long time," Miles continued. "They can make your days long if you cross them. I didn't want trouble, so I stayed quiet. And they harassed you." The admission reddened his face. "Yes," Naomi said softly. "You did." She studied him. 20 something, maybe 28, with the careful posture of someone who still wants to be proud of the uniform. Somewhere between the academy ideals and the locker room codes, he'd learned that silence preserved comfort. "How long have you been on?" she asked. "3 years." "How many times have you seen something wrong and let it go?" He flinched. "I More than a few. More than you'll admit out loud." He nodded, shame pooling like ink under the skin. Naomi sighed. "Not dramatic, just human." "Officer Miles, why did you become a cop?" "To help," he said, "to make things better." "Have you?" He looked up and then away. "No, not really." Naomi leaned forward, elbows on desk, fingers laced. "Here's what I think," she said. "I think you're decent, and the system you're in rewards you for going along. It tells you that the price of speaking up is paid in overtime, in partners who don't show up fast, in jokes with pointed edges." She let that hang. "That's going to change." She didn't dress it in slogans. "You have a choice," she said. "Keep your head down or stand up." Miles's breath hitched with both fear and relief. "What if I choose wrong?" he asked. "Then you'll face consequences," Naomi said. "But if you choose right, you'll have my support, and more importantly, you'll be able to look in the mirror without dodging your own eyes." Miles stood as if pulled up by a string. "I won't let you down, Chief." "Don't make promises you can't keep," she said. "Just do better tomorrow than you did today." He nodded, a little straighter now. When the door clicked behind him, Naomi let the silence return. She thought of Darius, how a good cop got taught a bad lesson by a department that valued loyalty over integrity. She thought of the bystander's phone light in the lot and the footage saved under a quiet file name. Outside, traffic thickened on the avenue, a reminder that the city's needs didn't pause for anyone's reckonings. Naomi reviewed the roster, flagging names for one-on-ones, mapping the parts of the building she needed to feel under her feet. A ping on her screen, an email from the deputy city manager. Welcome on one line, expectations in bullet points. She replied with 2 sentences: appreciation and commitment. Nothing performative. She stood, stretching stiffness from the last few hours, and glanced again at the lot. A shift-change stream of uniforms crossed the asphalt, heads together, energy fractured. Some curious, some closed, some calculating. She let the window frame the scene and filed it mentally for later. People show you who they are in the hallway. In the briefing room, the buzz hadn't settled. Sutter sat rigid, replaying the parking lot, anger composting into grievance. Chu kept her voice low but busy, offering confident interpretations to anyone within whisper range. Miles kept his head down and answered questions with careful neutrality. Naomi returned to the room like a conductor stepping back to the podium. Before you disperse, she said, a few clarifications. Heads pivoted. Starting today, we will standardize how we approach civilians at our doors, in our lots, in our lobbies. Courtesy isn't charity, it's protocol. You will verify before you escalate. You will listen before you threaten. That's not softness, that's professionalism. A murmur rose, familiar resistance, testing the fences. Naomi didn't bother raising her voice. Second, she said, we're auditing access points and signage. If a civilian could reasonably be confused, that's on us. She clicked another slide. Entrances, camera placements, coverage gaps. Finally, if you see misconduct and say nothing, you are part of it. If you join the laughter, you are endorsing it. If you retaliate against someone who reports it, you're done here. The words weren't shouted, yet they landed with more force than volume could deliver. Naomi powered down the projector. You know how to find me, she said, and dismissed them. Clusters formed immediately. Agreement here, eye rolls there, silence everywhere else. Sutter rose too fast, chair legs scraping. Chu's smile narrowed to a blade. Miles let everyone exit first. The dog walker's clip had already hit the neighborhood chat by then. Grainy, distant, but clear enough. A woman, calm as stone, refused to be bullied in a police lot. Comments stacked. Some skeptical, some furious, some hopeful, in a way that made Naomi's chest feel both full and heavy. She didn't need to be viral. She needed to be effective. She met briefly with records, asked questions for 5 minutes, listened for 15, and left with a notebook page of low-cost changes that would save hours of staff time. In patrol, she shook hands, learned names, made no speeches. In the break room, she introduced herself to civilian staff and asked about the coffee machine like it mattered, because culture is built in minor chords. Back at her desk, Naomi opened an old habit, a private log she'd kept since her second year in uniform. Not a diary, an accountability ledger. Riverbend, she typed. Day 1. Lot incident. Tone set. Resistance visible. Allies untested. She added a line for Miles. Wants to be better. And another for Sutter and Chu. Status leverage. Monitor. She scanned her calendar, then carved out weekly listening sessions, open door, no rank required. She drafted a memo on the new camera policy and walked it to legal for a fast eyes on. On the way, a veteran sergeant stopped her, called her ma'am with respect instead of bite, and offered a quiet, "We needed this." Naomi nodded once. Winds didn't trumpet. They tapped your shoulder. The deputy city manager called. "Chief Brooks," he said, upbeat and measured. "How's your first morning?" "Productive," Naomi answered. "Challenging in the right ways." A pause. "The clip from your lot is circulating," he said. "It's being read as calm leadership under provocation." Naomi didn't bask. "I'm aware," she said. "We're addressing it internally." "Do you need anything from my office?" "Just space to work," she said, "and support when change squeezes." "You have it," he replied, and meant it enough for now. After the call, Naomi walked the second floor, detectives' cubicles humming. She didn't comment on the decor, the inside jokes tacked to partitions, the small shrines to cases solved and unsolved. She made mental notes about layout inefficiencies and traffic flow. On the stairs down, she crossed paths with a civilian clerk balancing an avalanche of files. Naomi opened the door and held it, then took half the stack without fanfare. The clerk blinked. "Thank you, Chief. What's your name?" "Tanya." "Tanya, tell me the one thing that would make your job easier." Tanya glanced at the file avalanche. "A scanner that doesn't die twice a week." Naomi smiled. "Noted." Back in her office, she started a list labeled Quick Fixes. Scanner, better signage, de-escalation scripting for front desk. She flipped open the small framed photo on her shelf. Her parents on their porch in Georgia, laughing. Darius, in academy grays, younger and impossibly hopeful. She pressed the frame shut gently and returned to the work. Noon approached, and the building shifted tempo. People out for coffee, boots heading to cars, phones ringing with fresh complaints. Naomi reviewed use of force reports from the last quarter, patterns forming like constellations. She flagged entries that smelled off, vague language, missing witness info, inconsistencies between narrative and body cam timestamps. She sent 3 concise emails, request clarifications, schedule follow ups, hold on an approval pending review. Her door stayed open. 2 officers walked by, peeked, and kept moving. One paused, squared shoulders, introduced herself, and asked for 5 minutes about a case that kept her up at night. Naomi listened, asked 3 questions, and ended with, "I'll sit second chair on your next community meeting." The officer looked stunned, then relieved, then committed. The afternoon briefing for supervisors started on time. Naomi opened with logistics, shift realignments, staffing needs, fleet maintenance, and then pivoted to culture. "You don't just manage paperwork," she said. "You model standards. If your team hears you minimizing complaints, they will too. If your team hears you praise restraint, they'll practice it." She identified 2 upcoming community events and assigned rotating attendance, ranking officers included. Someone asked if this was optics. "No," Naomi said. "It's relationship architecture." She laid out the early intervention data review cadence and named a cross functional group to triage patterns. She didn't ask for buy in with raised hands. She looked into eyes and measured who squared up and who slouched away. Notes made themselves. After the supervisors dispersed, Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Saw the video. Respect no name." She archived it without replying. A second text followed from a community advocate she knew from a previous city. "If you need us in the room, say when." Naomi wrote back, "Soon." She walked to the evidence room, introduced herself to the techs, asked about chain of custody pain points, and listened until a solvable problem emerged, a labeling bottleneck that was more about training than technology. "We can fix that," Naomi said, and meant before Friday. On the way out, she passed Sutter. He gave a professional nod, face neutralized. Chu's expression was friendlier than morning, but not by much. Naomi didn't stop them, not yet. Discipline would come through process, not hallway theater. Back at her desk, she drafted a brief for internal on the parking lot encounter, factual, time-stamped, without color or conjecture. She attached the footage and a summary of accounts to be collected from the 3 officers. She requested that a neutral supervisor conduct the interviews. Transparency wasn't punitive, it was policy. A calendar reminder nudged, community liaison call at 1:30. Naomi prepared a concise agenda, listening first, then specific asks, then commitments with dates. She sipped coffee that had gone lukewarm and didn't grimace. The taste of day one would be whatever she decided. She opened an email to facilities about signage and added Tanya's dying scanner. The liaison call brought 3 leaders, church, business, and neighborhood association, each with histories and impatiences. Naomi started with "thank you for your time" and moved immediately to the part they actually cared about. "Here's what I'm changing and when." She gave dates, not slogans. She didn't duck the headlines or blame the community for its mistrust. She asked what cooperation looked like to them, not what made the department comfortable. When the business leader asked if this was just performative, Naomi answered, "Judge us by the next 90 days." She scheduled an open forum, promised a monthly update memo, and invited them to tour the precinct. After the call, she wrote herself one sentence: "Credibility is memory plus math. What we said and what we did." A knock, firmer this time. Internal's captain stood in the doorway. "Chief, we received your packet." "Good," Naomi said. "Please keep me apprised of process milestones, not substance." He nodded. "We'll do our job." "I expect you to," she replied. When he left, Naomi exhaled slowly, the only sign she'd been bracing. She scanned her messages. An officer from night shift requested a meeting to discuss a pattern at a particular intersection, pedestrian stops that felt less about safety and more about profile. Naomi slotted the meeting before roll call. She preferred problems with receipts, Sutter and Chu passed again. Orbit lines crossing. She let them go. She wasn't playing small ball. Systems fail forward until someone clocks them and turns the wheel. Late afternoon, Naomi walked the lockup. She asked the CO on duty about transport times, medical flags, and the temperature control that always seemed a degree too cold or too hot. She thanked the overworked public defender, making triage calls from a plastic chair, and asked what the department did that made her day harder. Missed discovery deadlines, the defender said, and officers who don't show to arraignments. Naomi wrote it down. Back upstairs, she carved out 30 minutes for policy review, noting where language was mushy enough to invite excuses, firm words, fewer loopholes. A sergeant emailed about a rumor of a welcome party prank for the new chief. Naomi replied with a single line, "Let's skip the prank and get to work." The sun slid toward late day gold. Naomi called her mother. 2 rings, then that familiar voice. "You all right, baby?" "I am," Naomi said. "First day was eventful." She spared the details and shared the essence. Her mother hummed, a sound like prayer and pride braided together. "Your brother would be grinning," she said. Naomi closed her eyes, saw Darius's grin, felt the ache and the engine of it. "I'm trying to make it count," Naomi said. "You are," her mother answered. After the call, Naomi stared at the whiteboard across from her desk. It held nothing yet, just space for moves. She wrote 3 words at the top: start, sustain, defend. That would be the cycle. She uncapped a fresh marker. The marker squeaked through lists: training calendar, community nights, early warning audits, body cam checks. She added names to each task, never leaving ownership vague. She pulled 2 case files from a stack, both involving force complaints, both closed too quickly for comfort. She set them aside to reopen if needed. She looked out at the parking lot again. One of the morning patrol cars was back. She pictured the same asphalt, the same door, a different morning. She pictured Sutter, if the roles had been reversed. Would he have given a strange man in plain clothes the benefit of any doubt? The answer wasn't scholarly. She turned to her computer and drafted a short directive: plainclothes verification protocol. Respectful, standardized, recorded. Policy makes fairness repeatable. A rap at the door. "Chief?" It was Tanya with a clipboard and a hopeful expression. "Facilities says they can replace the scanner by Friday if you sign this." Naomi signed. "Thank you." "Thank you," Tanya said, clutching the paperwork like a relay baton. Naomi smiled after her. Small fixes ripple. She answered a few emails from officers who'd been on medical leave, welcoming them back and asking what support they needed. She forwarded a training video on de-escalation that didn't insult people's intelligence. She scheduled a quarterly review of pursuits, no rubber stamping, real analysis. She wrote a note to herself: measure what you praise, praise what you want, repeated. The whiteboard began to look like a plan instead of a wish. Evening crept in, lights angling, shadows lengthening across the carpet. Naomi poured water from a dented pitcher and finally took a long drink. A dispatch supervisor stopped by with a report on call queues during peak hours. Naomi listened, asked for 3 concrete changes that could shave seconds without burning staff, and okayed a pilot starting Monday. She sent a quiet thank you email to the sergeant who'd told her earlier, "We needed this." Gratitude shouldn't be rationed. She reviewed the calendar for tomorrow: press availability at 9, community walk at 1, internal listening session at 3. She parceled her energy like a resource, because it was. She opened the security footage again, watched herself walk through the gauntlet without flinching. Footsteps stopped outside her door. A knuckle tapped, hesitant. Naomi said, "Come in." The door opened, and this time it was Officer Chu. She closed the door behind her, stood straighter than she had in the lot. "Chief," she said, "I owe you an apology." Naomi studied her, noting the effort it cost to be here. "Go on." Chu's eyes didn't run away. "This morning was unprofessional. I made assumptions. I spoke to you like I didn't belong," Naomi finished. "Not to wound, but to name." Chu nodded once. "Yes." What changed? Naomi asked. Seeing you in that room, Chu said. Hearing you talk about your brother. And recognizing I've let the easy laughs do the talking. It wasn't a full turn, it was a start. Thank you for saying it out loud, Naomi said. That's the only way we get better. Chu exhaled. I'll cooperate fully with internal, and I'll own my conduct. Good, Naomi said. And beyond that, I expect you to model better. If you hear it, stop it. If you see it, report it. That's not snitching, that's staying worthy of the badge. Chu nodded. The stance softened. Understood. She left, steps a little lighter than when she'd entered. Naomi stared at the closed door for a long breath. Accountability didn't always roar. Sometimes it knocked softly and used your first name. She updated her ledger with one line. Chu, apology, watch for follow through. She didn't add a gold star. She didn't need to. The building thinned as shifts turned over and offices emptied. Naomi walked the quiet halls, reading bulletin boards, measuring morale by the notes people left for each other. At a glass case near the lobby, she paused at a wall of commendations, names from another era, some deserved, some complicated by what she now knew. She added a future task: modernize recognition so it reflects actual values, not just arrest counts. Outside, the lot glowed sodium orange. A patrol unit rolled in and idled, headlights breathing. Naomi thought about the morning again, the way Sutter's certainty had outrun curiosity, the way Chu had reached for the easy barb, the way Miles had retreated into silence. 3 behaviors, 3 different levers. She had plans for all. Back in her office, Naomi drafted the notice for tomorrow's internal listening session. No agenda, just stories, patterns, and what gets in the way of doing the job right. She sent a separate invitation to civilian staff, explicitly included. She prepared a brief statement for the press that neither dodged nor poured gasoline. She pulled up the command staff roster and scheduled one-on-ones for the next 10 days. The work wouldn't be a sprint, it would be a sequence of sprints. A message from internal pinged, interviews scheduled, footage archived, process initiated. Good. Systems only earn trust by being used. Naomi closed her eyes and counted to 10, a habit from a decade ago. Calm isn't luck, it's practice you can measure. When she opened them, the whiteboard still said start, sustain, defend. She added a 4th word: heal, because the work wasn't just policy, it was people with bruises you couldn't always see. She shut down the laptop, then restarted it to install updates, small maintenance, just like the department needed. Her phone buzzed with a message from Miles. Thank you for speaking to me straight today. She typed back, accountability isn't a threat, it's a promise. She stood, turned off the office light, then flipped it back on to jot one more line in the ledger. Day 1, truth out loud. She smiled at the mundanity of it and at its weight. Progress doesn't announce itself. It shows up to work early. Naomi gathered her coat, touched the star on her collar once more, and glanced out the window. The lot was nearly empty now, just a few cars and the echo of the morning's misstep. She thought of Darius again, of the young officers who'd chosen silence because the room taught them to, and of the civilians who'd stopped calling because the uniforms taught them not to trust. She breathed in, breathed out, and let her shoulders settle. Tomorrow would bring new knots to untie, new resistance to outlast, new small wins to multiply. The badge was still heavy. Good. It should be. She locked her office, the click sharp in the evening quiet, and walked down the hall with unhurried purpose. At the exit, she paused under a humming light and looked back down the corridor, past the briefing room, past the whiteboard, past the day that had started with a challenge and ended with a plan. She opened the door to the cooling air and stepped into it, spine straight, chin level. One day doesn't fix a department. It sets a compass. Behind her were policies to write, interviews to finish, habits to retrain, and officers to hold or let go. Ahead of her were communities deciding whether to extend trust again. Naomi adjusted her coat, felt the weight of the badge and the steadiness of her own pulse, and headed for her car. The night didn't feel lighter. It felt possible. She thought about Sutter and Chu, the way they'd stared through her like she was a trespasser in their tidy universe of unchallenged authority. And she thought about Miles, 28 and still salvageable if someone showed him a sturdier spine to lean on. Naomi opened her desk drawer and lifted a small framed photo. Her and Darius, the day they graduated the academy, caps straight, smiles huge, the future still believing in them. I'm finishing what you started, she told his younger face. I'm going to make sure good officers aren't punished for doing good. She returned the frame, exhaled, and bent back to the work. There was an ocean to cross, and no one else was steering. Dawn came early, and so did the phone. Chief Brooks, this is Mayor Rowan. We need to talk. Naomi glanced at the clock. Too soon for politics. Right on time for consequences. Good morning, Mayor. What can I do for you? Yesterday, the parking lot, there's a video. It's everywhere Naomi pictured the dog walker, phone angled, red recording dot. I figured, she said. Have you watched it? Clips, Rowan admitted. Council's spooked. Protests, liability, optics. What's our posture? Naomi's jaw tightened. Our posture? 3 of our officers profiled their own chief. Let's slow down on labels, he said. Could be a misunderstanding. Naomi let silence say what she didn't. Misunderstanding rarely looks that practiced. They looked at my credentials and called them fake, Naomi said evenly. On my first morning as chief, they threatened to book me for impersonation. I understand you're upset, Rowan answered. I'm not upset, she said. I'm disappointed. First in them, now in this call. The line went quiet, then with breath. Chief, I'm asking you to keep this contained while our PR team calibrates a response, he said at last. No press, no statements. We'll manage the messaging contained, spun, neutralized. Naomi pinched the bridge of her nose. You want me to keep quiet, she said, while we relabel a pattern as a mix-up. I want you to consider what's best for the city and your tenure. The threat was wrapped in civility, but it was a threat. Naomi stared at the ceiling tile grid, let a beat pass, then said, I'll think about it, and ended the call before her mouth added truth she couldn't unsay. She sat back, palms flat on the desk, every muscle urging motion. Her screen pinged with texts from unknown numbers. Saw the clip. Thank you for staying calm. Another. My teenager watched. She said she wants to wear a badge like yours. A third, you didn't flinch when they tried to make you small. Naomi's lips curved despite the day. Maybe the mayor was chasing the wrong problem. Maybe the point wasn't to hush the story. It was to lead it. She dialed a newsroom instead. Channel 7, the receptionist chimed. This is Amanda Patterson. Miss Patterson, Chief Naomi Brooks, Riverbend Police, Naomi said. I'm prepared to sit down on the record. A pause, the sound of a producer's head snapping up. Chief, we can have a crew at your office in an hour. Studio, Naomi said, and I'll wear dress uniform. When she hung up, she emailed her comm sergeant. Courtesy heads up, no clearance requested. Then she reread her own notes. What happened, what it means, what changes start now. No slogans, no dodging. When the car pulled up to the station, she took a breath, squared her shoulders, and chose candor over comfort. If she wanted a new culture, she had to model it. Under lights that made metals glint, Naomi sat across from Patterson, posture unforced. Chief Brooks, thank you for being here, the anchor said. Let's begin with the video. What did the public watch? Naomi looked straight into the lens. They watched 3 officers see a black woman in street clothes near a secure door and decide she didn't belong. They didn't verify properly. They didn't listen. They led with assumption. Those officers now report to you, Patterson said. How does that land? As proof there's work to do, Naomi answered. This isn't just about me. It's about who we serve and how we see them. What happens next? Policy, training, cameras, standards, and consequences when standards are ignored. On consequences, Patterson pressed, will the officers face discipline? There's an investigation underway, Naomi said. Due process matters, but so does accountability. If policy was violated or laws were broken, action will follow. My goal isn't vengeance, it's prevention. Critics say you're moving too softly, Patterson said. They want firings yesterday. Firings can be necessary, Naomi replied, but they don't substitute for fixing what produced the behavior. I'm building systems that make respect repeatable and bias harder to hide. Others accuse you of making this political. Naomi's gaze didn't waver. Recognizing human dignity isn't a partisan act. It's the job, Patterson nodded. Let the moment breathe, then thanked her. As the on AR light died, Naomi felt both lighter and heavier. Truth tends to do that. She drove home through a city buzzing with takes and timelines. The union posted a statement defending officers performing their duties. An activist collective called for a march outside the precinct. Commentators threw around phrases like race card and reverse bias and leadership moment. Naomi kept her eyes on the road and her mind on the next 10 moves. Overnight, support and scorn arrived in equal measure. Voicemails with gratitude, emails with bile. She answered what she could and ignored what didn't deserve oxygen. At dawn, she was back at her desk, writing policy language that closed loopholes and demanded verification before escalation. Change wasn't a press hit, it was paperwork, repetition, and an insistence that habits bend to standards, not the other way around. The days compressed into a blur of meetings and town halls, after hours coffees with clergy, and roll call visits where she did more listening than lecturing. Inside the department, the resistance showed its face, eye rolls that outlived humor, whispers that shut up when she entered, emails lost in transit. Some officers stood more openly with her than she expected. Others hid behind silence. Sutter and Chu were placed on administrative leave, while internal took statements. Lawyers followed. Statements hardened. Lines drew themselves. Naomi knew the tightrope. Push too hard and trigger a mutiny. Push too softly and betray the people waiting for proof that the badge could mean protection, not threat. She picked a lane, firm, transparent, paced like she planned to outlast the storm. 2 weeks later, the knock on her door carried confidence. Chief, got a minute? Miles asked. Always, she said. He took the chair, shoulders squared differently than before. I've been canvassing the squad about your changes, he said. A lot of folks are ready. Tired of the locker room code, Naomi felt hope flicker. How many is a lot? Maybe a third, maybe a hair more. That's a base, she said. What about the rest? His jaw tightened. Some are dug in. Sutter and Chu are dialing phones, telling people you're out to wreck the place. Naomi nodded. She'd expected shadow campaigns. There's something else, Miles added, placing a folder on her desk. I pulled use of force reports and complaints. Patterns, names you already know, and a few you don't. Naomi opened the folder and scanned pages that felt like weights. Copy and paste narratives, witness lines left blank, camera footage conveniently unavailable. She closed it gently. Most of this tracks with the loudest resistors? She asked. Most, Miles said. Not all. She nodded. Every rule has an exception. Exceptions justify audits. Thank you, she said. This is actionable. He hesitated at the door. Chief, be straight with me. Can this place really change? Some of these folks have 20 years sunk into doing things one way. Naomi looked out at the lot where she'd been sized up like a suspect. What's the definition of insanity, Sergeant in waiting? She asked. Doing the same thing and expecting different results, he said. Then we're done with insanity. We either change, Naomi said, or we decay in place and call it tradition. I'm not presiding over rot. Miles stood a shade taller. You can count on me and on the others I've talked to. We want better, then help me build it, she said. After he left, Naomi sat with the folder's weight. Each page was a person who'd been handled like a problem to be solved, rather than a neighbor to be served. She considered calling the mayor, but she knew what she'd hear. Manage optics, avoid external eyes, protect the brand. Instead, she dialed another number. Attorney General's office, a voice said. This is Chief Brooks in Riverbend, Naomi replied. I need to report patterns that may constitute civil rights violations within my department. The next month was a grindstone. The state opened a review, the feds followed. The FBI's questions were careful scalpels, not sledgehammers, but they cut deep. Subpoenas landed. A handful of officers resigned before interviews. A few were arrested on charges ranging from falsifying reports to civil rights violations. Sutter and Chu took pleas: probation, community service, termination with pension forfeiture. The union called it a witch hunt. Certain talk shows called Naomi an activist in uniform. City Hall tried to fire her. The council, reading polls in the public mood, held the line. Officers transferred out. Others retired early. Naomi filled the gaps with recruits who learned on day one that courtesy and truth were survival skills, not PR tools. Change scraped. Change also stuck. The noise didn't stop. Protests from union loyalists, op-eds from politicians who'd never ridden along after midnight, podcasts debating whether she'd gone too far. But something measurable shifted. Citizen complaints ticked down. Uses of force dipped. Clearance rates nudged up as witnesses answered phones that used to go straight to voicemail. Naomi didn't parade numbers like trophies. She posted dashboards the public could read and asked to be judged by trend lines, not press releases. Miles earned his chevrons and took on a new beat as a bridge, introducing officers by first name at neighborhood meetings, returning calls that would once have died in a queue, coordinating pop-up foot patrols that made grandmas on porches wave instead of fold their arms. Trust liked momentum. 6 months after the parking lot, Naomi stood before a ballroom of brass at a leadership conference. Chiefs, commissioners, command staff from departments sized like small towns and small nations. Change in law enforcement is hard, she began, because we worship our muscle memory. But muscle memory isn't strategy. She advanced a slide. Riverbend's line, graphs trending the right direction. 40% reduction in citizen complaints. 30% fewer force incidents. 25% increase in satisfaction scores measured by third-party survey. She let the data sit. But our real KPI is relationship density. How many people know an officer's name before they need help? Photos flashed, basketball games, book drives, an officer learning double Dutch from fourth graders. The room didn't clap. It listened. Better. Some of you think this is soft, Naomi said. You're wrong. This is tactical. It's easier to police a neighborhood that trusts you than a neighborhood that fears you. She clicked once more. The photo of her and Darius on graduation day. This is my brother, she said. He chose integrity over approval and paid for it with his career. Her voice found its steel. I took this job to make sure officers like him aren't punished for telling the truth, that residents aren't penalized for existing, that our oath isn't a slogan on a wall. She stepped away from the podium. We can keep repeating what we've always done and keep harvesting the same outcomes. Or we can evolve. The patch won't evolve for us. The applause was long, less thunder than tide. Back in her hotel room, Naomi's phone rang. Sis, Darius said, voice warm with pride and history, I caught your talk online. She smiled at the ceiling. You taught me half of it. You did the part I couldn't, he said. You're steering the ship. Feels more like bailing and rowing at the same time. She laughed. It'll matter, he said. Maybe not this month, but it will. I'm betting on it, she said. You always did. After they hung up, Naomi looked out at a city not hers, lights pricked into constellations. Somewhere under those lights, decisions were being made in squad cars and living rooms. Maybe a few more would tilt toward right tonight. She thought about the woman in the grainy clip who'd refused to shrink in a parking lot, and the chief who'd faced a ballroom with data and a promise. Same person, split by a season of work. One had absorbed a department's flaw. The other was forcing the department to fix it. Naomi set out tomorrow's suit, turned off the lamp, and let herself feel something she'd rationed since day one. Hope. Not the speech kind, the quiet kind that survives budgets and headlines. In the morning, she'd fly home, Too many policies left to tighten, too many officers to coach, too many neighbors to meet halfway. But for the length of the night, she allowed rest to count as part of the work. The return to Riverbend came with a wall of air and an inbox that had multiplied. Naomi moved through both. She met with the new cohorts, men and women a hair older than academy average because she'd prioritized life experience over reflex tests. You're here to solve problems, she told them, not to win arguments. She convened supervisors, pressed for after action reviews that went beyond within policy. She sat in on dispatch to hear the rhythm of calls, approved a pilot that shaved seconds by shifting scripts. After lunch, she walked the block with Miles and two neighborhood leaders, listening more than talking. On the corner, a man who'd once shouted at patrol waved instead. Progress wears work clothes, Naomi said. Miles grinned. And comfortable shoes. The pushback didn't evaporate. Anonymous emails accused her of ruining morale, as if morale could be healthy in a house built crooked. Sutter's former circle framed him as a martyr on social pages that did more heat than light. A council member needled her in a public meeting about overreach. Naomi answered with policy citations and outcomes, not theater. That night, headline writers did what headline writers do. The morning after, Naomi did what she does, kept moving. She reviewed camera audits, signed off on a procurement that replaced a dying evidence scanner, Tanya's smile a small bonus, and scheduled a department-wide listening hour with ground rules written in sentences that fit on a single line. Short rules travel farther. Hard rules survive opinion. One late evening, as the building thinned to echo, Miles knocked again. Chief, quick update? Come in, she said. He sat, more sure than the last time. The group we talked about, the third? It's bigger, he said. After the promotions list posted, some fence sitters noticed who's getting rewarded. He handed her another slim folder. These are the officers volunteering for community shifts and a separate list of incidents where peers stepped in to de-escalate. Naomi flipped through, angles of good news hidden in dry summaries. What about the loud opposition? She asked. They're still loud, he said, but they're fewer. Naomi nodded. Noise isn't the same as numbers, he hesitated. There's chatter about you being too public. She smiled. Sunlight's a disinfectant. After he left, Naomi scanned logs until midnight, then the inbox she tried not to let own her. One subject line stalled her. A grandmother, thanking an officer for sitting on her stoop after a burglary until her hands stopped shaking. Another, harder one, a complaint about a brusque traffic stop. Accountability comes with both kinds of mail. She drafted a note to the officer on the stoop, praise with specifics, and opened an inquiry on the traffic stop with a request for footage. Leaders shape what gets repeated. Before shutting down, she stared at the photo frame again. In it, Darius's smile didn't know yet where the job would take him. Naomi touched the glass. We're bending it, brother. The office hummed its quiet reply. The next morning brought a call from the city attorney. Chief, your cooperation with the state and federal reviews is improving our risk posture. Translation, doing the right thing also served the budget. Naomi let that irony stand and asked for timelines on consent decree style recommendations she'd preemptively adopted. Later, in the garage, she watched as recruits practiced a new verification protocol at secure doors, greeting first, asking second, commanding last, body cams on at the start, not when tempers already bloomed. Respect is faster, she told the training sergeant. Watch your timestamps. Politeness actually saves minutes. In records, Tanya flagged a bottleneck. Naomi walked the chain and cut it with one policy tweak. Small frictions wear people down. Removing them is strategy, not kindness. The mayor requested a meeting. Naomi went anyway. In his office, art curated for donors watched them talk. Chief, Rowan began, I'll admit, the metrics are encouraging, but your media posture, transparent, she said, necessary. He steepled fingers. It makes some stakeholders nervous. So did seatbelts, Naomi said, until they saved lives. He blinked, then smiled despite himself. You don't make my job easy. Neither does crime, she said, or lawsuits. He sighed. You have counsel support, and the sky hasn't fallen. Keep me looped, please, I will, she said, and I'll keep looping the public. On the way out, a staffer whispered, My nephew wants to join because of you. Naomi thanked her, then filed the moment where she keeps fuel. That week, Naomi launched monthly porch report nights, officers fanning through blocks to ask residents a simple set of questions. What's working? What's not? What would make you call us sooner? Answers were practical: a light out, a corner where loitering turned into dealing, a language barrier at the front desk. She sent work orders, reassigned beats, and hired bilingual clerks. The next dashboard showed a small dip in response times and a spike in tips that actually panned out. People talk when they're heard, Miles said during a debrief. People shut up when they're managed, Naomi added. They laughed, then got back to divvying tasks. In a hallway, an officer Naomi barely knew stopped her to say, It feels safer here. Not softer, safer. That was the point. Late Friday, a council hearing unfolded like theater. A veteran skeptic accused Naomi of kowtowing to activists. Naomi answered with outcomes and policy language that referenced case law more than podcasts. A pastor testified about a time an officer apologized without being prompted. A small business owner described losing fewer workdays to court because cases were better prepped. A mother talked about calling for help after a decade of not. When it ended, the skeptic still scowled, but three colleagues who'd sat on the fence moved a half step. Government inches matter. Back at the precinct, Naomi stood in the empty briefing room and pictured the first morning again. The hush, the shock, the badge catching light. Same room, different weather. In her office, she opened a new document titled Lessons We Paid For. She wrote lead with verification, cameras on early, words before orders, protect whistleblowers in reality, not just policy, train scenarios that look like your actual city, reward restraint with the same ceremony as arrests, teach supervisors to count what matters. She added, don't barter integrity for peace and quiet. It never pencils out. She saved it where new sergeants would read it before pinning chevrons. Her phone buzzed with a community alert. Youth center vandalism overnight. She texted Miles, Let's get uniforms at tomorrow's cleanup. No press, he replied with a thumbs up and a broom emoji. She smiled at the emoji, then went back to the to-do list that never shrank. Months turned into more proof. The DOJ issued recommendations. Naomi had already implemented half. Recruit classes diversified, not by quotas, but by changing where they looked and how they advertised the work. Exit interviews got honest. Use of force reviews stopped sounding like copy machines. In a corner of the internet, detractors kept detracting. That's what corners do. On a Saturday morning, Naomi and a dozen officers swept glass at the youth center. A teenager with paint on his hands asked if he could ride along someday. When you're 18, she said, and after you fill out 12 boring forms. He groaned, then grinned. Bureaucracy as barrier and safeguard, the paradox every chief lives with. Naomi leaned on the broom and let the sun warm her face. She thought about how far the station had moved in a year and how far it still had to go. Reform wasn't fireworks, it was chiseling. Internal Affairs now had the staffing to audit in real time. Supervisors had to write after-action reflections that included what they'd praise and what they'd redo. The city attorney stopped calling only when lawsuits were filed. Now they met quarterly to anticipate risks and change practices. Naomi scheduled a rotation where command staff worked a front desk shift monthly. Perspective is a tool, she told them. Buy it by standing where the public stands. The first time, a captain came away stunned by how many folks just needed directions. The second time, no one was stunned. They were prepared. Awards season came with odd optics. Plaques for restraint, recognition for a sergeant who intervened on a colleague mid-spiral, commendations for a dispatch team that rerouted resources during a power outage. Some old guard grumbled that the job was becoming a TED Talk. Naomi smiled and kept signing certificates. One evening, a woman approached her at a grocery store. Chief Brooks, she said, I used to tell my son to avoid you all. Now I tell him to wave. Naomi thanked her and asked her to call if that ever changed. Back at the car, she sat behind the wheel and let herself feel the heaviness that never left and the gratitude that sometimes visited. Both were honest, both could be carried at once. Not every day cooperated. A pursuit went wrong. A suspect crashed. Injuries followed. Critics revived old arguments with new grief. Naomi held a press conference, released footage quickly, and paused pursuit policies, pending review. Inside, she sat with the involved officers, listened without judgment, and then laid out the next steps with clarity: medical, mental health, administrative leave, full investigation. She visited the hospital, spoke with families, and told the truth even when it tasted like tin. The city held its breath. The inquiry found mistakes and offered fixes. Naomi implemented them before the ink dried. The department took a reputational hit and kept moving. Change isn't immunity from harm. It's the discipline to tell the truth about harm and repair what you can. On a quiet night, she drove the old routes she'd learned as a young detective, streets with stories, corners with ghosts. At a stoplight, she watched two officers walk instead of roll, their conversation easy with a trio of teens on bikes. She didn't stop them to make a point. She let the point exist without her. Later, back at the precinct, she wrote three handwritten notes: to the officers on foot, to a clerk who found an error that could have cost a case, to a lieutenant who owned a mistake before anyone else did. Paper travels differently than email. People keep it in drawers for years like proof that the work matters. She knows because she keeps a few herself. Another invitation landed, this time not to speak but to advise a nearby department starting its own climb out of a ditch. Naomi accepted on one condition: I won't sell you a fairy tale. It gets uglier before it gets better. In their first session, she mapped Riverbend's arc. Missteps included. She talked about metrics that mislead, about how middle managers make or break culture, about how to shield reformers without making them feel like pets. She warned them that the loudest voices aren't always the most numerous, and the quietest aren't always allies. Start with doors and greetings, and gals, she said. Start with how you talk to the person who's already mad. They took notes. She left them a copy of Lessons We Paid For. Back home, Naomi hosted a roundtable with community groups who disagreed with each other almost as much as they'd ever disagreed with police. She kept them at the table with time limits and facts. An organizer demanded more data. A shop owner demanded fewer break ins. A public defender demanded earlier discovery. Naomi promised what she could and calendared the rest. Judge me by a 90-day window, she said. Then a year. Someone asked her what happens when she leaves. We build stuff that outlives me, she said. Protocols and habits, not slogans. Or afterward in the parking lot, the organizer, who'd been toughest on her, said, I still don't trust institutions. Naomi nodded. Me neither, she said. That's why we keep receipts. She kept Darius on speed dial, not because she needed permission, but because she wanted perspective that wasn't written on a memo. They still giving you hell? He'd ask. Only the productive kind, she'd answer. They traded stories: his new job mentoring young officers in another city, her battles with procurement, his reminder to take Sundays off sometimes. On one call, he said, You remember that phrase Dad used? Do right until it's a habit. Naomi laughed. Pretty sure I had to write that 100 times after curfew. Worked, didn't it? Still working, she said. After they hung up, she wrote it small in the corner of her whiteboard. Habits outlast speeches. Habits are how buildings remember what they're supposed to do. An email arrived from a national magazine. Profile request. Naomi stared at it, then archived it. Not now. The work was the profile. Instead, she cleared her afternoon and walked intake. A young officer, nervous, took a report from a man who'd been carjacked. Naomi listened, then later told the officer three things he did right and one thing to sharpen. Lead with the person, not the crime, she said. It show you did. Keep doing that. In the lobby, a kid tugged his mother's sleeve and pointed at Naomi's badge. That's the chief, he whispered. The mother smiled at Naomi. Naomi crouched, said hello, and asked the kid what superpower he'd pick. Fixing broken stuff, he said. Good choice, she said. Hard one, too. A storm rolled through one weekend and knocked out power across 3 precincts worth of blocks. Dispatch triaged, patrols redirected traffic at dead intersections, detectives moved evidence with chain of custody notebooks old school. Naomi parked herself in dispatch with headsets and coffee, listening to the hum of competence. When the lights came back, she sent a department wide note titled What Worked, What Didn't. It was short, clear, and self implicating. Praise for dispatch, a mea culpa for a command level delay, tasks assigned with dates. When praise lands evenly, criticism can too. Monday, a captain, who usually bristled, came by and said, I didn't get defensive reading that. That's the idea, Naomi said. He nodded. I'm not used to that feeling. Get used to it, she said, smiling. Later that month, the conference organizers emailed. Could they publish her slide deck? Naomi sent it with notes on what she'd change if she were starting today. She included mistakes that cost her time and political capital. People remember confessions more than boasts. That night, alone in her office, she rewatched the parking lot footage once, not to nurse anger, but to measure distance. The woman in plain clothes, staying calm while 3 officers tried to limit her world. The chief today, limiting no one except those who chose to harm. She closed the file and put it where it belonged, archived, not erased. Some memories you keep so you don't start telling yourself prettier stories than the truth you lived. Accuracy is a form of honor. Another community forum filled the auditorium. A teenager asked if cops ever get scared. Every day, Naomi said, courage isn't not feeling fear. It's doing the right thing while you feel it. A mother whose son had been roughed up years earlier asked why she should believe this time is different. Naomi didn't sell. She pointed to numbers, policies, faces, and then said, because if we fail, you'll have data to prove it and avenues to fix it. Afterward, the teenager's father approached, shook her hand, and said, I still don't like you all. But I like this progress frequently sounds like grudging respect. Naomi took it. Back home, she answered emails until midnight, then turned off the light without checking the news. The next day began with a call from a foundation wanting to fund youth programming alongside the department. Naomi said yes with conditions. Community groups would co-design the programs, and officers would attend as learners first, helpers second. She signed off on a pilot for restorative justice conferences in low-level cases, then walked the evidence room where new labeling cut hours off searches. Miles popped in with a grin and a spreadsheet. Complaints down again, he said. Also, my mom made cookies for records. That's the metric that matters, Naomi deadpanned. In the hallway, a veteran who'd threatened to transfer a year ago told her, I'm staying. Naomi nodded once. People don't announce conversions. They just stop packing. Outside, sirens dopplered by, then faded into ordinary city noise. Near dusk, Naomi stood at the window and watched the lot where it had started, the same striping, the same door that had mocked her presence with its quiet. She thought about arc and echo, about how institutions push back and people persevere. She pictured recruits learning a first day very different from hers. She pictured Miles coaching a young officer through admitting a small mistake before it calcified into a big one. She pictured a grandmother dialing 3 digits without rehearsing a speech in her head. She pictured Darius listening to her debriefs, telling her to sleep. The badge still weighed what it weighed. It always would. The trick wasn't making it lighter. It was keeping your shoulders strong and your compass true. In the final notes of the evening, she wrote 3 lines on the whiteboard under start. Sustain, defend, heal, keep promises, keep receipts, keep people. She cleared a corner of her desk and set tomorrow's agenda. Press questions she'd answer briefly, a community walk she'd linger on, 2 coaching sessions where her job would be asking hard questions and listening without flinching. Her phone buzzed. Miles again. Officer on C shift diffused a fight with words only. Sending clip. She watched the minute long video and smiled at the quiet brilliance of it. She sent a thank you that named the skill. Name what you want repeated. She shut her laptop, straightened a stack of forms, and let stillness have the room for one breath. At the exit, under the soft buzz of fluorescence, Naomi paused and looked back down the hallway, past the briefing room where silence had once been shock, past the office where she'd saved the footage and started a ledger, past a year of chiseling that already showed on the building's face. She pushed through the door into cooling night air, spine tall, chin level. One day never remakes a department. Neither does one headline, one protest, one hire, one firing. Culture is an accumulation of choices, corrections, and courage. Behind her, policies to finish, interviews to close, mentors to grow, habits to reinforce. Ahead of her, a public deciding again and again whether to trust. She adjusted her coat and walked to her car. Hope kept pace. Lesson 1. Verify before you flex power. If you've lived long enough to remember black and white TV, church basement meetings, and the long walk from Selma to now, you know a simple truth. Respect comes first, authority second. On her first morning, Chief Naomi Brooks stepped from a graphite gray sedan into a parking lot that smelled like cold metal and old oil, every inch familiar to anyone who's ever started a new job before sunrise. 3 uniforms closed in like a storm front, certain she didn't belong. No questions, just orders. For many of us who've seen assumptions cost neighbors their dignity, the scene feels painfully American. A woman, black, calm, in plain clothes, treated as a trespasser on ground she already led. Older readers know this script. When people skip the part where you verify, you end up with harm, headlines, and apologies that come too late. Naomi didn't bite. She held her line, then walked inside and faced a room where the air went still as she said, "I'm Chief Brooks." That moment wasn't a gotcha. It was a mirror. Her first order of business, cameras on early, greetings before commands, standardized verification at secure doors. Sounds small until you've buried a friend over a misunderstanding. You and I know the stakes. We've watched cities pay with dollars and trust. Naomi's rule fits on a note card and belongs in every squad car and lobby. Verify first, then decide. Respect saves time. Courtesy saves lawsuits. Dignity, once lost, takes miles to recover. Lesson 2. Accountability is a promise, not a punishment. Many of us raised families on paychecks that didn't stretch far, kept receipts in coffee cans, and taught our kids that character is what you do when nobody's watching. Naomi's compass was set years earlier by her brother Darius, a good officer who chose honesty over comfort and paid for it with his career. That kind of loss leaves a mark. So when the mayor called to manage optics, Naomi chose a harder road, sunlight. She spoke plainly on television, no slogans, no spin, then moved from talk to tracking, real early warning systems, body cam audits, promotions tied to restraint and truth, listening sessions where rank waited its turn. Some officers rolled their eyes, some tried to make her tenure a cautionary tale, but the needle moved where it counts, fewer force incidents, fewer complaints, more witnesses willing to answer the phone. If you've lived long enough, you know quick fixes don't hold. It's the routine that reforms us. Naomi kept receipts, policies with dates, dashboards the public could read, consequences that arrived without theater. She didn't confuse being loud with being right or being quiet with being weak. She told young officers what our generation told our children: do right until it's a habit. And when a supervisor owned a mistake, or a patrol officer de escalated with words alone, she wrote a note in ink. That's how culture changes. One honest report, one fair promotion, one apology said before a lawyer drafts it. If you're 65 or 75, you understand. Accountability isn't the hammer, it's the hinge that lets trust swing open again. Conclusion: the legacy we choose. We measure life in seasons now, grandkids' birthdays, memorials that come too close together, quiet mornings on porches that look down Main Street. Watching Naomi turn a bad first hour into a better department reminds us of the legacy that still sits in our hands. Verify before you flex power. Treat accountability like a promise you intend to keep. That's not just good policing, that's good citizenship. If we want our children to inherit something sturdier than slogans, we have to keep the habit of doing right, day after day, mile after mile. Friends, after hearing Naomi's story and these two lessons, verify before you flex power and keep accountability as a daily promise. How have your own years taught you to handle moments when authority meets assumption, especially if you were the one being doubted or the one standing nearby? And if this resonated, would you share a memory in the comments, hit like so more neighbors see it, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so we can keep learning together, week after week, building a community where experience speaks, stories heal, and practical wisdom travels farther than any headline?